has a book out this week called The Making of a Salafi Woman, Paths to Conversion. It's an investigation into why modern British women are attracted to a strand of Islam which dictates a very traditional way of life. The author is Dr. Annabel Ing, and I asked her to explain what Salafism is.
The term Salafi just literally means that you attach yourself to what's called the Salaf. And the Salaf are the first 3 generations of Muslims. So we're talking about the Prophet and his disciples, those who came after them, and those who came after them. And Salafis today tend to seek to emulate the ways of the Salaf as literally and strictly as possible, and also the guidance set out in the scriptures. And that's why they tend to be associated with very socially conservative practices, especially concerning women. Salafi women will often wear a face veil, a Niqab, for example. They tend to believe that you should obey your husband and adopt a traditional gender role. They also believe in very strict gender segregation, secluding yourself from non-related men.
You make the point that many of the practices of Salafism are very conservative, and many women would think today very restrictive in terms of what they mean for the way that women live. And that's quite often led to the assumption from the outside world that women are forced into these roles. Did you find that to be the case?
Not at all. In fact, I was looking for signs of social pressures, if not outright coercion. As a feminist non-Muslim myself, I did have my concerns about the face veil and practices like that. But what I found was, if anything, they were subject to social pressure to do the opposite, to take off their veils. They were typically these women from less conservative Muslim backgrounds. So their parents, perhaps their mothers, wore a headscarf, but certainly not a face veil. Or they were actually converts from other religions or no religious backgrounds at all. So their families were typically outraged by their decision to become Salafis, and some of them reacted by threatening their daughters and even, in some extreme cases, being violent towards their daughters because of their decision to become Salafis, which they made independently of them.
Well, one does have to ask then, what made them do it?
Every woman's story was completely unique. Some were spurred by personal crises, varying in intensity. That could be the death of a close relative, getting them to think seriously about religion. Others, no such crisis, a much more gradual process. But what I found they all had in common was this sense of, in a way, an intellectual conviction that this was the pure, authentic version of Islam that they'd been seeking usually for a number of years. And it was often at college or university when they reached that point of conversion to Salafism. And they'd often been through various experiments with different religious groups, and particularly different Muslim groups. Eventually, the Salafi version of Islam was much more compelling in that they anchored what they said in the scriptures. They were very skillful in backing up everything they said with scriptures. And that was a kind of firm reference point that they could access and believe in, rather than following the views of different sheikhs that they encountered on campus.
So did you, as you describe yourself as a feminist non-Muslim, feel sympathetic to the process that they'd gone through?
I think when I first entered the field, I did have my concerns, as I said, about the face veil and practices such as obeying husbands. I did worry that this was a regression in women's hard-won rights. And I have to say, I personally dislike the face veil, the Niqab. I personally dislike it. But I had to appreciate that women have the right to wear it if they choose to wear it. And what I was finding was evidence only that they were choosing to wear it. I didn't find a single case of women being forced to wear it.
I suspect a lot of people listening to this may ask themselves, are these the sort of women who will go off and join ISIS?
This is a misconception, I believe, in that the vast majority of Salafis, and certainly the vast majority of Salafis in the UK, are not only non-violent, but they tend to be very against political activities such as demonstrating and lobbying and even these kinds of activities. And what I found as well was that their leaders have actually been very vocal and active in condemning ISIS in the strongest possible terms. One Salafi preacher, for example, created an anti-ISIS leaflet and put it on the internet and asked his followers to mass distribute it in their communities. And this leaflet went so far as to say that you should inform the non-Muslim authorities if you get wind of a terrorist plot. So I think not only are they non-violent, but they're also vehemently anti-jihadism and anti these kind of trends that we've seen as with ISIS.